Good afternoon. I'm Ed Pozzuoli, President and CEO of Tripp Scott, and today with our Politics and Sunshine, we have the House member representing the 11th State House District in Jacksonville, Sam Garrison. Sam, welcome.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Give everybody just a quick snapshot of your background.
Sure.
Now that you're elected, but also on the ascendancy to be Speaker a year or two from now.
Yeah, I'm a lawyer. My wife is a high school teacher. I've got two girls, one getting ready to graduate University of Florida, one going to Florida State in the fall.
A little rivalry in the house.
Yeah, we'll be our house divided for sure. I was a prosecutor for 10 years. I started my legal career. That's still kind of how I think of myself, even though it's been about 15 years since I was doing that. Did 10 years at the State Attorney's Office in Jacksonville. Had a great career there. Went in private practice, a small law firm, and then politics happened, and here we are.
So what focused you in on one of the big topics that you seem to focus in on? I think it's an important one, is mental health.
Yeah.
And so what role does the Florida legislature and in creating laws and guidelines around that, where do you want to go with that?
That comes, honestly, there's not a lot of folks lobbying or special interests advocating for folks struggling with mental illness. But when you talk to people, I probably talked to 1,000 groups, different types of groups, church groups, political groups, business groups, trade groups. And every time I talk about mental health, so far we're batting 1,000. People start nodding up and down. You can see the response from people because, in our world today, especially in a post-COVID world,
right,
what we're seeing is there's just a real crisis involving mental illness all across the spectrum. Most acutely in our teenagers and young adults. I've got two teenage girls. My wife's a high school teacher, like we said. So my focus has really been a lot in that particular area. And then with my background as a prosecutor, dealing with law enforcement and seeing what they're dealing with,
right,
when the calls come out calls for service come out.
And the impact on that.
Yeah, it's real. It's real. Right. And we're asking our police officers to serve as de facto mental health counselors, right, and that's not fair to them or the folks who are in crisis. So ultimately, as a state, we tend to get involved in these situations. A lot of these folks require state resources either on the front end or the back end, and so the goal is to have a plan of how we're going to address it going forward.
So what's the plan on your end? What do you think we need to focus in on from a legislative standpoint on how you can help and the House can help with addressing some of this?
I could talk about this for days, but I'll focus on one particular aspect,
sure,
and that's on the most acutely mentally ill, who oftentimes find themselves in the county jail. The county jail really is, when you talk to our sheriffs, all 67.
Not really equipped to handle.
The county jail is the largest mental health institution.
But it's a hard place to get service, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So what we've been working on for the last couple of years already and going forward we'll continue to work on is making sure we have sufficient bed space for those who find themselves in the criminal justice system so we can get them out of, still in secure environments, but get them out of the county jail so the local sheriff doesn't have to deal with it and in the hands of professionals so we can try to get those folks either restored to competency so they can face trial or in situations where it's post-adjudication, give them the help they need so they don't become a danger to themselves or others.
And so they don't come back through the system again and again and again.
Exactly.
All right. You also focused a little bit on homelessness.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of the two go a little bit hand in hand. There's some related issues. Talk about that, Passion.
Well, there's a lot of crossover in those situations. But when we talk about homelessness, there's kind of two different schools of thought. There's the folks who are down on their luck and circumstances have found themselves in a situation where they need kind of a hand up, and that's one category. But the focus I've had is really on the latter category, which is the chronically mentally ill, the chronically addicted who find themselves in a chronically homeless condition. It comes from, honestly, his personal experiences. This came from a couple years ago. I was visiting my brother out in Denver and visiting his family, and he's been out there for 20 years or so and used to be so proud of his city. And we were out there visiting. I asked him if he'd been downtown to go see a Rockies game recently, and he said, "No, I don't go downtown anymore." Well, why is that? The homelessness is just out of control. And I looked around, and he was right. He told me some horror stories that really kind of got my attention. And this is a couple years ago. And we're very politically very different. I'm very conservative. He's a little more on the left. But he said it's something to me that I remembered. He said, "I don't care what your ideology is, what your political background is. If you could fix this problem, I'll vote for you." And to me, that was it was an anecdotal story, but one that resonated with me. This is somebody who, I love to death. He's my brother. Right. But we don't agree on much politically. But he was making a statement like, hey, this is a real problem that people are trying to face in our community. And then you start, once the eyes are open, you look around and you see it's everywhere.
Right.
Now, Florida, we were nowhere near the challenges that other parts of our country were in, but I firmly believe that if we did do something to kind of get proactive, we might find ourselves in that position. So that's where that comes from.
How do you think we should address that? I mean,
Yeah.
it's one thing to identify the problem; it's another thing to try to contribute to the solution.
Well, we spent a lot of time our last legislative session trying to work through this, and a lot of back and forth with the cities, the counties, the governor, the Senate, obviously my colleagues in the House, and law enforcement, trying to figure out what's the right balance. Where we ultimately ended was we came to the conclusion that we had to set standards as a state for what were our non-negotiables. And the non-negotiables for me, obviously, I'm a former prosecutor, so public safety is number one. Where we came to was what we said, public spaces, our parks, our sidewalks, the places we rely on to have a healthy, thriving community have to be protected. And we're going to set standards in place and say that those areas have to be protected from long-term public camping or homeless camps, things of that nature.
Right.
But we're going to give discretion to the local governments on how best to accomplish that purpose, because the needs of Fort Lauderdale are very different from the needs of Jacksonville, from Clay County, where I'm from, Pensacola, and the rural communities. The challenges are very unique in a very diverse state like Florida. So we're going to give locals the ability to address it how they see fit, but ultimately, if they are not or unwilling or unable to address it, we're going to put the power kind of in the hands of the people and those who are adversely affected to ultimately seek redress through the courts instead of top down from Tallahassee. It's an innovative model. It's never been tried anywhere else in the country. So this is a wholly unique approach we're taking here in Florida. I can tell you there are a lot of eyes on us, and a lot of states that are going. You'll see this next year or two that will be following suit. I'm encouraged because even you can have debate about the laws, is it the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. I obviously think it was the right thing to do, and I enjoy debating that. But what I think is clear is, regardless of where they are on the initiative, on the policy, we've seen more proactive steps throughout the state in the last 6 months to address homelessness than in probably the last 16 years. And to me, that's a sign that we're doing the right thing.
And it's a sign that not only we're looking at public safety issues, but we're also looking at the human side of this, trying to address the core issue.
Absolutely. Look, I'm a big believer this is a moral issue, especially when you see people who are ravaged by drug abuse or mental illness. Sometimes, whether it's their fault or not, every story is unique, but it's a human loss. So we want to focus on the individual while simultaneously fighting to preserve and protect our great cities in this state. I think we found the right balance.
So, the politics of the House.
Yeah.
Interesting that you've been able to navigate it, and that you're going to, if everything goes according to plan, you're going to be the next speaker after Danny Perez.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. Look, the House is an interesting political beast. You followed it for a long time. There's 120 of us from around the state. Everyone's a type A personality, and no one got there by accident, right? And what you learn pretty quickly is you don't get anywhere by yourself. Each member is 0.8%, not even 1% of the whole. So to be successful, you have to understand teamwork and collaboration. I'm fortunate that my colleagues gave me the opportunity to be in a position to lead here in a couple of years. And
it's quite an honor.
Whatever I get is because they gave it to me. I didn't do anything to earn it myself. So all credit goes to my colleagues, and my hope is that by serving them, we can serve the state. And
what are some of the priorities you see on the horizon under your leadership?
Well, there's things I care about, obviously. Mental health, obviously, one. Right. Criminal justice is a big deal for me, given my background. Healthcare, specifically the area of pediatric healthcare, is a passion project. But what I've found looking back at history is, as a presiding officer in the legislature, you can have things that you want to accomplish, but oftentimes events will dictate your priorities. So we'll see.
Not immune to that.
We're not immune to it. We're one hurricane, or Lord knows what else could happen that will change that narrative. So for me, it's about being a good steward. I'm a big believer in term limits. I've campaigned heavily for them, and I'm a big proponent of them. I wouldn't be here without them. But incumbent with that comes a responsibility to make sure you do your part, you try to make it a little bit better than you found it, then hand it over to the next person, which is, to me, how it's supposed to work.
And then what do you foresee the sessions coming up? What do you foresee the House and the House and the Senate accomplishing together on the legislative side, and obviously working with the governor, a little bit changes some seats and people moving around all over the place, particularly on the cabinet side.
Yeah, look, session has its own story, its own rhythm. And really, you don't really know what that's going to be till you're in it. So ask me that in a month, and I'll be able to tell you. But I'm old school, in that I'm a big believer in our system and the tension that comes with that. one thing I love about our speaker, Speaker Perez from Miami, who is a dear, dear friend and someone I can't say enough good things about. He's a zealous guardian of the institution, and he's going to encourage members to come bring their ideas. Now, with that comes a concurrent responsibility to back it up.
Right, to be accountable
for them, and to me, that's how it should be. And it should be difficult to pass laws because, quite frankly, as a conservative and a small government guy, I think most of the laws that people propose aren't that good. And so let's try to just have only the best of the best actually come into law. And be something that we have going forward.
Good intentioned efforts sometimes run afoul.
There's nothing wrong with good ideas that need a little more time to work through.
Gotcha. And so heading into session, Representative, we want to thank you for the time.
It's my pleasure.
And I wanted to make sure that you got introduced to the South Florida community, as Fort Lauderdale particularly. But everybody here at Tripp Scott really does appreciate your manner in which you lead. And I think it's an honor that we're going to have you as a speaker come next time around.
Well, thanks for the opportunity.
But go up there and do some good for everybody, and get that. Tell Danny Perez, let's go. Let's go.
We'll try not to screw it up.
All right, that sounds good.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you.